I did it. We completed the Ironman 70.3 Indian Wells at La Quinta. And honestly, I almost canceled this race 3 times in the 2 weeks leading up to the event for a number of reasons, which I will get into. Now, in this video, this is going to be helpful if you know if you're going to enjoy this or not. This is going to be helpful if you are a type 1 diabetic like me, if you're an Ironman athlete and want to know more about the course like me, or if you just like a good story with lots of twists and turns, some scary situations, and a near hospital visit. I don't like that part, but you might. You know, it's entertaining. No, in this race, I'll just be honest with you. We had a lot of stuff going on in our personal lives. Every weekend was a new trip to a different destination. My first full distance Ironman was a few weeks before this, and I promised my wife that was my last Ironman event. It was my third, and third total, right? I had 2 70.3s before this at Oceanside and Santa Cruz, and I was like, Ironman California, I gotta cross off a full Ironman and then I'll be done. And as soon as it was over, I was like, hey babe, there's this thing called the Triple Crown. And if you do 3 Ironman events in a year, it's like a bragging rights thing. And she's like, you've got to be kidding me. And so I was like, we can drive to it. It's local, sort of. It was still like 3 hours away. We've got a toddler as well. So it was complicated, but the week leading up to this event, we almost canceled it 3 times. And one of them was coming back from Disneyland when my daughter got sick and I got sick, diabetes-wise. Almost had to go to the hospital and was like, and we want to do more travel? So leading into it, just wasn't in a great space mentally. And getting to the race, we only spent 1 night in the hotel. So the night before and then the next day, I'll be getting up at 4 a.m. to go to the race and then go home. So there was no relaxation at all. I don't recommend that. Now, if you're going to do this race, highly suggest sticking around for a little bit. It's actually kind of a nice area. I wish we would have had time to relax, but this was nonstop, go, go, go. A few weeks ago, I launched my first ever book called The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula. So I actually educate in the world of type 1 diabetes. And we're flying out tomorrow, 4:30 in the morning, to go to New York because it hit bestseller. And we're going to Times Square because my picture's going to be out in Times Square, which is wild. But as you can tell, a lot of chaos. So with this race, we did not cancel it, obviously, but made the deal with my wife that, hey, this is the last one. I'm burnt out, and I know you are as well. So for the foreseeable future, I do not have Ironman events on the calendar, but I do have other ultra endurance events coming up. So I'll keep you guys updated. But with this race specifically, a couple quick things. One, I have a friend who did this race before and said it was absolutely freezing. And my coach knew this as well. So I had been doing cold water training going out into the bay in San Diego, about 56 to 58 degrees most mornings. And I go out there right at sunrise. So it was the coldest it would be. And that seems to have played a pretty big role in me not shutting down in the race. And the race itself ended up being 58 degrees. So I got lucky. And in addition to my cold water training, I had also been taking cold showers, like ice cold showers, every single day for 2 weeks leading up to the event. I took that part very seriously because in every event that I've done previously, Oceanside, Santa Cruz, Ironman California, I've gone hypothermic. And this has happened in training a few times as well, where I'm just uncontrollably shaking. And my transition 1 is extremely slow as a result, because I have to stop being in hypothermia before I can get on the bike. And I have to punch in my insulin numbers and all that too. And I need steady hands for doing that. So took it really seriously. Also wore booties during this race. Found out that was wetsuit legal and booties legal. So kept my feet nice and warm. And that was a pretty big difference as well. However, and I do want to add this in as a warning to anybody who is considering wearing booties, during the swim, obviously you're bumping and getting punched in the face and everything, so there's just thousands of people in the water with you. Every single person that would stroke around my feet, it would pull my booties off just a little bit, and it was driving me insane. So I'd have to stop, I think in total like 4 times, to pull the booty back on my foot so it wouldn't fall off. So that was annoying. But aside from that, they were a great decision. Certainly helped keep me warm. Now, in the night leading up to this event, a chaotic schedule as it has been, I got No sleep. I mean, we went to bed on time, but I literally woke up every 20 minutes. And then you're up at 4:30 because you got to catch a bus to get to the swim, which is a 30-minute bus ride away. And I was 2 miles away from the bus station area, the shuttles, right? So the logistics behind this race were not my favorite. And that was one thing that made it quite difficult, was even getting everything set up and registration and check-in the previous day. You got to go to like 3 different places to get everything all checked in. But on race day, it made it fun because every sport is in a different location, right? So you've got the swim at a lake, then you bike out into the city, and then you come back for a run that's at a golf course, and it's very adventurous. So that part was fun, but the logistics of getting set up, kind of a nightmare. You do have to decontaminate your wetsuit as well, so you go to a special dunk tank where you dunk your wetsuit in chlorine water, and it's just a whole thing, lots of rules, lots of steps to get ready, and that part was frustrating, but ended up being worth it, which I'm going to tell you about in a little bit. This race had a fun twist at the end of it. So getting up, it was chilly. It was mid 40s, I think it was, and the desert obviously can get pretty cold. So mid 40s, the water was 58, which didn't feel terrible, and I knew that my cold water training had helped a lot with that, just exposure and getting used to the cold weather. So it felt like nothing. Came out of the water and was not hypothermic. For the first time ever. And I was really grateful that it worked. And my blood sugars, my blood glucose levels, I have type 1 diabetes. I tried 3 new strategies that day, which nothing new on race day, right? But you kind of have to just adapt with diabetes and stuff. They all worked beautifully. So my blood sugars were perfect, the first time that's ever happened, and allowed me to have the fastest transition I've ever had. Flew through it. Just one little hiccup where I didn't know you're supposed to bring your bike bag with you to hand off to a volunteer. So I had to run back to the beginning, get my bag, and then go give it to a volunteer. But then outside of the swim, it wasn't too cold. The location was gorgeous and absolutely stunning. Its sunrise over the lake was beautiful and just peaceful. Heading out into the bike, I've been ramping up my speed, so I was excited to just let loose, knowing that everything was on plan so far. And during the bike, they actually told us about this the day before at check-in. We had the unique opportunity to bike on a professional race course for cars, right? So they closed it down. I guess apparently the way that the race authority, or whatever you want to call him, race director, had described it was, it's a racetrack for rich people who have race cars and it's closed off just for them. So they opened it up for us, and I tell you, my face was just beaming. I was smiling ear to ear. I was making race car noises, just like, yeah, as I'm passing people, and just having a blast. My average power output went up like 80 points because I was so thrilled to be on a race course. I didn't even notice it. I looked at my watch and I was like, I'm pushing way too hard. You need to dial it back or you're going to burn out in the second half of the bike ride, right? But it made it so fun. And the rest of the bike was absolutely beautiful. The roads were a little bit bumpy, I will say that. So being in Aero, obviously I got my bike behind me. As you can tell, I got the 6 Surveilla P Series 2025. I love it. It was bumpy. There were sections like the racetrack where it was smooth like butter, and you notice it because the rest of the roads were quite bumpy. So you got to keep an eye out, look out for what's going on. You get your warmth back a couple miles into the bike ride and just lock in. It's totally flat. It's a fast course. Set a new PR for myself, which was getting under 3 hours for the half iron bike, and felt really good about that. In fact, I'll show a video. We'll pause so you can see it. But there's a little moment where I came in, I saw my family rooting me on at T2 coming in from the bike ride, and I was like, sub 3, I did it. And for me, it's a big deal because last time in training, I missed a sub 3 56-mile bike ride by, I think, like 30 seconds. So I was like, I did it, I beat it by like 6 minutes. This is amazing. So absolutely incredible feeling. And I was like, you know what? Even if I don't hit my big goal, which is a sub 6 half Ironman, I'm stoked that I got a sub 3 for the bike. Like everything got dialed in. On the bike, nutrition was good for me. Some hiccups with my blood sugars that were kind of iffy, but nothing as bad as my Ironman California experience, where I had to make some aggressive medication decisions that could have put me in the hospital. So thankfully this time didn't have to do anything too crazy, but I'll detail this in my my diabetes page. but the insulin adjustments weren't the best decision, and they definitely impacted my run. Now, getting into T2, everything went smoothly. I felt great. That was, I think, 7 minutes, and that includes putting sunscreen on and like going to the bathroom, and realized I was on pace for a sub 6, and I lit up, right? Now, before I get into that though, on the bike, I want to make sure there's nothing else that I forgot about the bike ride, because it was beautiful, it was fast, and I think that overall wasn't too windy either. So like conditions were solid for that bike ride. Now within the run, I watched somebody else's video on this and thankfully was prepared for it. I did a little bit of hill training before, but not nearly enough. Most of the run is 2 loops on a golf course, and it is hilly. I mean, not like consistently uphill, right? But it's just up, down, up, around, down, around, up, down. And you're like, what the heck is this, right? It's the epitome of rolling hills, but they're like not fun because they curve. And so you can't get your speed up or get in a good cadence with your steps. So it's like every step on the golf course is just torture mentally, because you're like, I can't get in the groove, right? That being said though, I knew that I could do a sub 2 hour half marathon on flat ground, and my pacing for my 6 mile run before heading into this race was on hills, and I also maintained the appropriate pace, which is a sub 9 minute mile with hills. And so I was like, okay, I think I can do this, just push through. And it started to get a little hot towards the end of the run. So got through the first loop of the run at like 58 minutes, I think it was. And I was like, okay, if I can do that exact same pace again the second time, we're good. I think I can actually hit sub 6. And then I was like, oh shoot, but my first 1.5 miles was way too fast on the first loop, and I don't know if I can do that again. I was like 45 seconds too fast for my pacing. So it was like, that included a faster pace. Shoot. But so far, blood sugars were cooperating as well. So I was taking my fuel, everything was going great. But as it was starting to heat up, certainly felt that impact. This was my first race where I was dumping water on my head. Lift up my hat, throw water underneath, just keep going, and trying to stay locked in. And it wasn't until mile 10 that I had issues with my diabetes. My blood sugars had a looming hypoglycemia. So hypoglycemia is a low blood sugar, and it was a bad one that was coming on. So unfortunately, the best thing you can do in that situation is consume sugar and slow down. Because when you slow down, your digestion resumes at a faster pace and allows the sugar to uptake and actually disperse through your body instead of just sitting in your stomach and small intestine. So I knew I had a choice to make, which was treat this and be safe, or push the limits, maybe end up in the hospital and not get to finish the race, and see where things go. And so I had this phrase in my mind. And it seems that every race that I do, I've got new phrases that pop up, which is fun. So the phrase for this one, because I was just threading the needle with my blood sugars, and it's kind of a dangerous spot, to be honest, was it's fine until it's not. So I'd look at my blood sugars and be like, oh, geez, okay, it's fine until it's not. And then at mile 10, it wasn't. And I was like, shoot. And I'd be repeating that the whole time on the bike too. There's a few situations where I was like, oh no, what's going to happen? And I was like, that's just anxiety. That's fear. It's fine until it's not. Keep going, keep pushing. You can do this, right? And that was the attitude the whole time, was just push, push, push. And I thought about saving my legs on the bike, and I was like, just hit sub 3 on the bike, and then you'll see how it goes in the run. It's fine until it's not. Your legs are fine until they're not. Just keep going. And that's how I carried myself through. So miles 10 and 11 were a struggle. I stopped to walk for maybe 50 yards to try to get the sugar to uptake. And then my blood sugars came up just enough to where it wasn't dangerous anymore. I was like, okay, run again. But then upon running again, my legs just shut down. Just massive cramps, and my ankles, feet, chins, quads, hamstrings, calves, everything was just locking up. I was like, crap. I got out of that groove, and now my body wants a rest. It wants to stop. And I had to fight those for the rest of the race. And it wasn't until mile 11, about 11 actually, so maybe 11 and a half, I looked at my watch and I was like, my mile time went from a solid like 8:45 to 10:45. I was like, I've lost it. And there were 3 situations where I realized I probably lost the option to hit a sub-6 half Ironman race. And it was a little bit depressing. Immediately my thoughts started going through and I was like, it's because of my diabetes. I've got this excuse and it ruined it for me. As an athlete, I know that I can perform. I easily could have kept that pace, and I was like beating myself up over it. Like, man, I could have done this and diabetes stole it from me. And that was the actual phrasing in my head. And, the mental demons just kind of crept out. And I still wasn't in a great spot safety-wise with my blood sugars, but I looked at my watch again and I was like, you know what? I kept switching back between my pacing and the actual time, because I measured out the start of my race. I knew exactly down to the minute when 6 hours was. And I was like, if I sprint the last mile and a half, 2 miles, I think I can still make a sub-6 half Ironman. So I start to pick up the pace and immediately legs lock up. I was like, crap. So now I'm fighting this balance of like, don't completely lock up and cramp up, but you also have to go as fast as you can without locking up to make it a sub-6. And it was a decision that I made. I was like, you know what? It might not happen, but I want to give it my best effort. And that became the new deal that I made with myself. I was like, you know what? This might be your last Ironman event ever. Who knows, right? I mean, even if it wasn't a planned last event, something could happen health-wise. Maybe this is the last time you ever get to do an endurance sport. And so with that attitude, this other song came into mind. Who's it? It's Daggers by We Come as Romans or something like that. The chorus is I will conquer. And it's like a heavy metal song. So it's I will conquer. And I was just like repeating that as I was going through it. And it was invigorating. And what I didn't share yet that I will share now. Oh, and here she is. I was just about to talk about her. How funny. So that's my daughter who just said I just want to see him. She's amazing. And I'm going to get choked up when I talk about this, because the night before the race, unprompted, and I thought my wife told her to tell me this, but unprompted, she walked up to me. I'm probably sensing that I was a little stressed, right? Because it's pre-race jitters. And she walks up to me and says, "Daddy, you can do it." And I was like, what? It just caught me so off guard. And I was like, well, shoot, now I have to do it, right? So imagine in the midst of that pain, my legs locking up, in the midst of these blood glucose numbers that will not settle. I was fighting I'll put this in perspective. I had to consume around 125 grams of carbohydrates per hour during the run. That's insane. Most people lock up, or I guess their stomach locks up, if you go beyond 60 or 70 per hour, right? I was at 125 carbs per hour just to not go low with my blood sugars. I was so full. On top of that, blood glucose numbers weren't cooperating, so it's kind of dangerous to push harder. I should have probably stopped. And on top of that, my legs are locking up. And there's this voice in my head from my beautiful little girl saying, "Daddy, you can do this." Yes, I can. And I am going to do it. And so from that moment on, I knew at the very least, I'm giving it my absolute best effort. I will leave it all on the field. I will not finish this race with anything left in me. And with that, I set out to sprint the final 1.5 to 2 miles that were left. With every quarter mile, checking my watch, are we on pace? Checking my watch, I think I can make it. Checking my watch, I don't know if my body can handle any more of this. It feels like things are starting to shut down, right? Like things are going numb and cramping and locking up. It's just the worst feeling. One of the most difficult pursuits I think I've ever taken on was that final sprint. Watching my blood glucose numbers just hovering right above what would be considered a dangerous threshold. Getting closer, half mile, 3/4 of a mile, 1 mile. I can see around the bend and through the trees, there's the finish line. I can hear the chants of the crowds. I hear my mom and I see her because my family was there as well. yelling, "Give it your best, you can do this, make this the best one yet." What I didn't know is that they had all been talking and they watched my pacing go from on point to he's not going to make it to now, I didn't know this, they saw that my pace was on par to finish sub 6, but didn't want to spook me. And so instead of saying, "You're going to make it if you keep this pace," she said, "Make this one the best one ever." And I dug deep. And that's a phrase my dad, I've heard him say before for each of us kids during our athletic moments, dig deep. And so we're going, pushing. I am sprinting. And I realized it probably didn't look like a sprint because I was absolutely exhausted. But with a mile pace, I think of about 7:45. So it's not even my fastest mile ever, but it felt like the absolute limit for me in those moments. I sprint down the chute, throw out my arms, let out a roar, and run through a finish line that delivered to me a sub 6 half Ironman time. I came in at 5 hours, 59 minutes, and 5 seconds. I made it under 6 hours. I didn't die, and I then did lock up. My whole body was just done. And man, the crazy part is you can't see your timer, and your time doesn't show up until you cross the finish line. So I didn't know if I made it. I was just overcome with emotion that I had given it my best. And I thought, you know what, whether it made it or not, I'm proud of myself and of my efforts. I see my wife after the finish, and I'm still in like the chute, getting my medal and hat and everything. And she's like, "You did it." And I was like, "I know." And she's like, "No, you did it." I was like, "What are you talking about?" Right? Like, I know and it hit me, and I was like, and we were probably 20 feet apart, right? And I put up my hands and I showed the number 6. I'm gonna get choked up right now. And she's like, "Uh-huh." And I pointed down, like, under 6? And she goes, "Yeah." And she starts tearing up, and I immediately just bawling. And I recognized that, I mean, it was my family that carried me through it. It was God. For me, I'm a person that believes in God. And I had been saying prayers that whole race. I had been singing praise songs. And when I race Ironman, I just get overwhelmed with gratitude. Where I'm like, wow, how cool is it that I get to do these things, that I get to push my body to the limits, that I get to swim, bike, and run and do all this fun stuff. I can afford these things, that diabetes hasn't taken this away from me. And in that moment, it all just came crashing down into my heart where I was like, this is the greatest feeling ever. You know, it's a mixture of overcoming mental difficulty. I have some lingering PTSD from a few times when I almost died from low blood sugars, from hypoglycemia. So when I see low blood sugars in the middle of a half Ironman, it freaks me out, freaks me the heck out. And to have overcome that and pushed through, pushed into more danger zone, right? It was not a wise decision, but I chose with some safety nets surrounding me. I knew at what point I would have to stop, right? I knew that point and where it was, but to overcome mental blocks, absolute fear, terror, when I saw those numbers, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, right? To overcome that mental fear, to overcome the physical limitations of my legs locking up, my cramps, and just everything shutting down during an all-out sprint, giving 100% effort, and then to have that surrounded by spiritual strength, emotional strength, relational strength, my family there to see me, and my wife to be the one to tell me, because I didn't know that I made it under 6 hours. That was my big goal. That was like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if I could do that? And I truly believe this was my perfect race. This was everything that I needed it to be. Now, I could have done it faster. I know that. If diabetes didn't get in the way, easily could have done that faster. But that race was everything that I needed it to be. I was able to overcome more because of the difficulty. So I'm grateful for those challenges. I'm grateful that my diabetes forced me to face my fears. head on. And I tell you, I was nervous. Definitely was nervous. I mean, everything came together beautifully. And I mean, I thank God that I was able to do that safely, especially as a dad. You know, I've got my 3-year-old who needs me, and my wife who needs me. I can't put my safety at risk. So that was a little sketchy, you know, in some of those moments, but I knew at what point I'd have to call it if it truly was that dangerous. But what a magical event. What a magical time. And you know, I realized I haven't even shown this yet. We've got our medal right here. So this is what the finishing medal looks like. And I mean, I'm still overwhelmed. Like, I look at photos from my finish and I can feel those emotions. I think that's one of the beautiful things that endurance athletics offers, is this opportunity to face your fears, to break self-imposed limitations, to see what you're truly made of. And I can honestly say that I'm proud of the person that I discovered that I am in those dark moments, like in Ironman California, facing some really difficult situations, mentally, physically, with my diabetes, all this stuff, in a full Ironman. And in this one, it's absolutely incredible that we get this opportunity to push ourselves beyond what we thought were our limitations. So I'm going to stop talking before I just start speaking nonsense. But this race course offered me a gift, and very grateful that I had the opportunity to pursue this end goal, to achieve it. And my mom said something great at the end of it. She said how cool that God chose to give you that as an outcome. You know, he didn't have to give you a sub 6 hour finish. And I was like, you're absolutely right, you know, but what a blessing, what an honor. And yeah, anyways, I'll make another video with all the blood sugar details and put that on my other page. But all in all, it was my perfect race. And I'm beyond stoked that I get to share that with you guys. So thanks for sticking around. I think that's it. I think that's everything. This might be it. Maybe I'll do more. I don't know. But grateful for the opportunities that it's given me to pursue greatness and to challenge my own limitations. And maybe it'll give you that same opportunity. Thanks for sticking around. All right, that's all I got for you. Have a great rest of your day. Best of luck on any races you have coming up. Be sure to stick around if you want more of this. We'll see you in the next one. And as I tell my clients, keep up the fight.